Marty, I've been crying. I've been crying. No, I should be crying, but no, I got an eye infection, and I'm gonna have to deal with this. So if I'm dabbing my eyes, it's not because I'm not sad about the state of affairs that we're going through right now, but it is. I poked myself with something and got an infection. Nonetheless, I want to ask the question, and I did on Twitter recently. Why is it that there so many Canadians are so incredibly gullible?
It's a great question. Remember years ago they used to say that the internet was going to make us smarter. I think it's made us dumber, and it's made us gullible. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer why we are more gullible. But what's your theory? Because or what did people say when you asked them the question?
Oh man, I'm not like you on Twitter or on X where I get this incredible amount of responses all the time, but this one I did. And I think it reigned true for a lot of people. It's like craziness. Like why is this a question? Why it hit a nerve. It hit a nerve with a lot of people, and there's a lot of people saying a lot of different things. Some people with the accusatory, yeah, well, you're just a sellout, Clyde, because you're American, and this is kind of like par for what's happening in Canada along those lines. But a lot of people saying that people have been propagandized for so long. Some people blaming boomers. Every time you blame boomers, I hear about that in my comments. Absolutely, boomers don't like to be called boomers. The woke mind virus, years of programming, indoctrination. Some people are just straight up, I'm stumped. Totally crazy. But this is
well, I mean, it's one of the things that I've been doing for years on Twitter, which is instead of calling it gullible, I say, why are people unable to think critically? Which I guess translates or manifests itself in a gullibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I do that every day. Like every day I see comments from politicians, media, people, and I go, God, like just think a little bit more before you answer something or make a statement. And that's and I think so we're gullible because people have lost their ability to think critically. An example is when somebody says, what's a good example? Like years ago when somebody said Elon Musk is worth $40 billion. If he gave everybody $1 million, we'd all be, we'd solve the world's problems. I'm like, and they'll read that, and then somebody will reread it to me and go, yeah, Elon could solve. And I'm like, whoa, $40 billion. Like, do you know how to do? That's not a lot of money. Do you know how to do basic math, right? And so, or anyways, people get sold on an idea like, oh, windmills are going to save the world, and then I'll have people repeat a story to me, and yeah, like I'm polite. Generally, I'm polite, but yes, they're gullible, and deep down, some days I just feel like punching people.
Oh man. Now, so part of this is something you've been highlighting recently, and that's the polling numbers.
Yes.
So part of me looks at this and goes, oh man, really? That many people are that easily swayed by this whole thing. Now, the other part of it is, there's a bit of a confirmation bias that happens in polling. I can't remember the term for it. They have it. It's something along the lines of confirmation bias, but it's this idea that, when there's a big change in a political party, you get a lot more people rally behind it, and then they're more apt to say, yeah, I'll answer that poll, as opposed to, the other parties are dismayed and they don't want to answer the polls. They want to ignore the pollsters. So you'll see a flare up from one end, but then there's the other question is, how much of this polling data is legitimate? Like, how much of it is legitimate and how much of it is intentionally skewed?
Yeah, well, so for the people not entirely familiar with polls, what's not shown on the bottom there, if you scroll it up just a wee bit, that's the timeline, right? So the polls that are where it ends on the right would be the most recent polls, and basically that's the summary of, call it 200 polls over the last couple of years. So and what they do on this plot is they'll put where a given poll puts the popularity of the conservatives as a blue dot, and then the red dots. Anyways, what you can see is that lately, in the last couple of weeks, the red and the blue dots are approaching each other, which means that every poll that's been done lately is suddenly showing that the Liberals are closing the gap on the Conservatives. And so, speaking of gullibility, there is a gullibility. Like, are people literally silly enough to buy some of the Liberal propaganda? Like, you know, that Carney is like, oh, I'm miraculous. I'm going to change everything we've done in the last 9 years, right? Like, I'm suddenly going to cancel the carbon tax. I'm suddenly going to create better trade. I'm suddenly going to treat all the promises he's making. And I'm using the term Carney because he's the most popular in the polls right now. People are so gullible. Like, if to me, if you believe a Liberal today telling you something, that's the definition of gullible.
But that's my point. That's really my point in this.
So is that why you asked the question? Because or what was there something specific in the last couple of weeks that made you think Canadians are gullible?
Well, there's a few. So, like, obviously, it's the idea that a bunch of people who are, you know, it's polling that way because Liberals are invigorated. They're excited about the future. You know, as if the last 10 years hasn't happened, and they're coming forward going, yeah, let's get on board with those Liberals. They got a new face and a new brand. They don't have anything new about them. What are their choices? Their top contenders are the Minister of Finance and the Deputy Prime Minister, who's been in that job for a while. The same person who froze bank accounts, you know, invoked the Emergencies Act and took away the rights of charter rights of Canadian citizens. And the other choice is the guy that started the housing market bubble, the guy who brought interest rates down to virtually nothing for the longest time. And the outsider that has his signature on the $20 bill. I mean, it's so ridiculous. The guy who is behind all of the choices that the Liberal government made all the way along the way. And these are the choices. And somehow people are invigorated by that. If that's the truth, then that's really disheartening.
Which exactly right. Okay, cool. Because when I posted when I talked about those recent polls in the last little while, a lot of people said, "Oh, Marty, you can't believe the polls." I'm like, I don't want to believe the polls, but you know, when 4 or 5 polls in a row. So now you just gave me a possible answer, because I was like wondering, why would people suddenly believe the Liberals? Well, that's a simple answer that you gave that's valid. People are gullible. Like, people are gullible. It's a very simple answer. People are gullible when it comes to politicians. I mean, I have another theory. I do think the Liberals are surging a little bit in popularity because of the Trump effect. Like, Trump does scare Liberals. Remember, like, Trudeau took advantage of that in 2016, right? Like, vote for me, re-elect me kind of thing, because or 2018, because I'm anti-Trump. You know, and so they're playing on that. I'm sure there's a legitimate resurgence of Liberal popularity because of Trump.
And this, they're playing right into it. Like, so here's an ad that the Liberals are running right now, and this is trying to compare Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump. And I'll let the first bit of it play.
I plan to cut.
I get that audio up.
Foreign aid more.
A foreign aid freeze. A foreign aid freeze, isn't that right?
I plan to cut.
So they both have the same sensical, and I would say, given the light of what's going on, what we're learning about foreign aid in both countries, a very sensible plan to cut a ton of the foreign aid, which has been going to obnoxious things and not helping people at home, not helping anyone really in foreign countries, only, again, with the, you know, funneling money, putting it through these NGOs that are just funneling back into politicians' pockets. And just because they said the same thing, people are buying into this.
Yes.
You know, blue man bad, orange man bad. It's so ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I can sense your frustration. Your frustration is the same as mine this week. This week was like, are we really gonna do this? Like, are we gonna collectively lose our minds, believe the Liberals, and re-elect them buggers? That is like, if that happens, then I will be blackpilled. I'm trying not to be blackpilled, but if at the end of this year the Liberals steal an election from us and we Canadians let them steal that election, I'll be so shocked. But I'm almost preparing myself for that eventuality, because we may have an election.
We may have an election stolen from us just by the sense of not actually having one. Now, this is something that they actually do have in their power. Now, a lot of people are saying, no, this won't happen. It'll really kill the Liberals in the polls. Well, I mean, everything's killed the Liberals in the polls. Everything has killed the Liberals in the polls. But I still ask the question, what would Mark Carney want that the job of prime minister only to go right into an election for, when he could just hang on to it for another year?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're beating a dead horse on this one. I think we've talked about it week after week now. Yeah. I honestly think Carney has been sent by Klaus Schwab to finish the job that Trudeau couldn't finish. Like, Trudeau is supposed to, we're that post-national state that we're supposed to be the poster child for the World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab has this theory of like build back better, and he needed a country to try it out somewhere. He tried it in Germany. He tried it simultaneously in New Zealand, Canada. Klaus Schwab was proud of saying what did he use his words? He's penetrated the cabinets of yeah. And then it's his last kick at the cat to prove his book, and build back better. And he sent Carney to finish the job. I mean, Carney right now, like I'm absolutely blown away at Carney's strategy. He's not changing. He's actually not saying anything. He's still hanging on to the carbon tax. He's still hanging on to DEI. He's still hanging on to net zero. Like Carney he looks like he's not even capable of changing, because he's being told exactly what to do by the powers that be.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned how much influence he's had in Germany, France, all of these different countries, all of these countries that have gone to this green energy, but don't go to like real green energy. This is one thing that frustrated me so much. And I don't know if you saw this, Marty, but this is one that really got me. Well, Trudeau was over there with his having his honeymoon with his boyfriend in France. He had this to say at a conference.
We have all the building blocks for the future of the world's economy. Sure, it gets cold in Canada, but I know that a room filled with researchers in AI and investors in AI can get excited at a place that's 30 below for a few times of the year, which means half price on cooling for your data centers. Canada is a global leader when it comes to nuclear energy as well. From vast reserves of high-quality uranium to top scientists and nuclear engineers to the practical expertise that comes with large-scale operations and innovation for decades. And by the way, let me say this once and for all. As an environmentalist, for me, the debate is over. Large-scale nuclear reactors must be part of the solution for the future, because if we're not willing to embrace nuclear now, then coal-powered AI from other parts of the world.
See, he would never say. I know he would never say that in a room full of Canadians here at home, because I'd be standing in that room going, I'd be going like, you've never said this in 10 years. 10 years you've never said a single word about nuclear energy being one of Canada's strengths, but now you're on your last couple of days and you're in Paris in front of a crowd that doesn't know you and still fawns over you, and then he brings out this kind of bullshit.
Nuclear, which in his ilk have been shutting down the nuclear facilities in France and Germany and all these places, which have made them dependent on Russian natural gas, because we won't supply them with natural gas because we don't have a business case for it, Marty. And he's even talking about using coal to power AI. Are you kidding me?
Clyde,
It hurts.
I see the theme we're on. I mean, the reversals of the what did we hear this week? Oh yeah, pipelines are good. I mean, you and I screamed we need pipelines all over the country to get our oil to market for 10 years. Nobody listened. Suddenly, a couple of liberals and people out east are talking about pipelines. You had Jagmeet Singh, who for an entire year slammed Lawless. Lawless bad. Lawless bad. Lawless bad. What's Jagmeet Singh saying this week? Buy Canadian.
Buy Canadian.
Buy Canadian.
Yeah.
Buy Canadian. Which is Lawless, right? And Lawless is rebranding their shelves. They barely have to, anyways. Lawless would save more time putting the American products logo rather. Like that's the other funny thing, right? Stores are putting Canadian flags on everything that's Canadian. Save some time. Label the American stuff. Right? Because it should be the least anyways. What else did we learn this week? We had Stephen Gilbo for 10 years tell us, nuclear is bad. Internal combustion cars are bad, blah, blah, blah. What did Jagmeet Singh say we should do this week? He suggested we impose a 100% tariff on Teslas. Holy Moses. And then people will, and to your point about Canadians being gullible, Canadians will go, oh, that's a great idea. And I'm like, that's a great idea. 6 months ago, you were telling us that was a lousy idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Hook, line, and sinker. In fact, it's crazy. So I posted this out there because this is what is happening across Canada right now. All these signs on everything. And I said, remember when we refused to sell certain items because they were deemed, some of them were deemed non-essential? Yeah, we're almost there again.
Yeah,
we're almost there. We're just around the corner from that. And all it's going to take is, big bad Trump to impose tariffs that he said he was going to impose, that he said had a reason behind them. He said, this is why I'm imposing them. I'm putting them on it for this. And we're all acting surprised. We're all acting surprised, and we're all clamoring to our leadership, no matter if they're the ones that drove us into this problem in the first place. This is what's insane to me.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that picture of the shelves with Buy Canadian, Team Canada, Buy Canadian. I mean, Team Canada this week, that's another, I said Team Canada, the way they describe it happens about every 5 or 6 years. And then, so last week when Trump was really gung ho about tariffs, we were all supposed to go get our Team Canada jerseys and put them on. And now, at the end of the week, Trump says, okay, I'll give you 30 days and I'll drag my feet on tariffs. Well, it's like everybody took their Team Canada t-shirts, especially the Premier of Quebec, and then threw them back in the closet and then went back to their individual teams. I mean, the premiers are in Quebec's the worst, man. Quebec's the worst. Like the premiers are all in Washington today at as part of a trade delegation. Like the Premier of Quebec was asked about pipelines. He said there's no appetites for pipelines. So a week ago he was all pro pipeline. Now he's against pipelines. And then they asked him about the milk cartels. He said, nope, milk's off the table. We're not touching that. Milk's like.
Well, I've got a clip for that, and this is actually really good.
Yeah.
This is. We got to switch. Share this one now. So this is Brian Lilly. He was the one who asked the question, asking specifically about how the fact Americans keep asking this question. Here's his question.
On dairy, even friends of Canada down here raise the issue of dairy every time. Are any of the premiers, yourself included, willing to start talking about dairy and not getting rid of supply management? Because none of them say that, but they do say we're too restrictive. So if we've got to ask for something, are we willing to give anything on their biggest irritant?
So I'll go to the answer from this source because the audio is much better.
Because that's really where the last conversation ended and where we need to pick it back up to see what that negotiation is going to look like and what concessions are going to be made on both sides.
Oh, Danielle wants to step in there and say something.
No,
here we go.
I want to say a few words on dairy. In Quebec, we are against changing the management of the offer. The reason why we have that is to protect our regions.
So it's protectionism.
Right? So we don't give any subsidies to milk producer.
Oh, the taxpayers do.
So the only thing we do is we manage the offer, and it's a way to protect small farms in all the regions. So for us, it's not negotiable.
It's not negotiable. A really bad deal for everyone involved. It's not negotiable. This is the dairy cartel. And I'm really disappointed to hear this kind of language, because we're talking about renegotiating. We're talking about Quebec losing all of their aluminum manufacturing, losing all of it. Like, all of it.
It shows how powerful the dairy cartel is, because to the best that I can figure out, it's across Canada, dairy is like no more than $1 billion industry. We're talking milk, cheese. It's small, and there's about 18,000 dairy farmers. Sure, it's 18,000 jobs, but 18,000 people is Rogers Place, or it's a stadium. I mean, yes, it's 18,000 families. I get it, but
it's 18,000 people on arable soil that could do something else. They don't have to be making milk.
They'd still make
aluminum manufacturers.
They still make milk.
Yeah, but what's an aluminum manufacturer facility worker going to do if the aluminum manufacturing is gone? If it's gone, a farmer can change what he farms. An aluminum manufacturer can't retool. It's just not going to happen. And we're putting all on the line for this stupid thing.
I was going to finish my thought. I mean, we're risking a trade war for a small industry in Quebec. It exists everywhere else, but it's the biggest, dairy is big in Quebec compared to other provinces. Yeah, we're almost going into a tariff war to protect a measly $1 billion industry. And our trade with the US is $790 billion. We're risking $790 billion to protect a handful of dairy farmers.
Yes. And I want to make a delineation. I want people to understand this. The 25% blanket tariff on Canadian goods, that was a tariff that was a sanction. It was change your behavior on the borders. It had nothing to do with being a trade war. It was none of that stuff. Canada was the one, like the Canadian leadership were the ones that came forward and tried to make it a trade war by doing retaliatory whatever. Now this, with what Trump's doing with the steel and aluminum, that is trade war stuff. Like, he is now intending to protect American steel workers, American steel, all of these things, and he's putting these tariffs on. And the purpose of this, the purpose of what he's trying to do, is to try to encourage those manufacturers to take their tooling and all of that stuff, move it south of the border, and just make it in the United States. And it might work. But the other aspect of this, the flip side of this is, what if America just puts puts all this pressure on us, tanks our dollar, puts a 25% tariff on these goods? It doesn't change the price for the person consuming the steel and the aluminum, because it's offset by the tariff. They would be saving a bunch by a lower Canadian dollar, and then offset there. It doesn't hurt them. US makes revenue. They get to make cuts in other ways. I mean,
again, I'm, aluminum and steel are the same as oil as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't even retaliate, because I think it's a bad idea on Trump's part. It's not like and especially on steel and aluminum, because he's putting the tariffs on every other country. So the Americans themselves are because he's putting those tariffs on every other country, we can actually compete, because we're closer to the Americans than, say, Japan or Brazil or anybody else who makes steel. So,
see, a lot of people forget about how tariffs work. Now, a tariff is a tax on the people who are in your own country.
It's an import
purchasing the item from another country. So if there's a tax on steel and aluminum from Canada, it just makes steel and aluminum from Canada more expensive for Americans. It doesn't change the price of steel and aluminum in Canada. But
no, I agree, and that's why I said, because he's putting the tariffs on every country, then it really doesn't affect it absolutely doesn't affect Canada, because we're still going to be cheaper. But again, I would just let this play out. I I hate what our government is doing right now and threatening a war over these kinds of things. Like, just
right.
let it play out, you know. And you're right, it is all about, it was retaliatory because last week, you know, Trump invited Japan, the Japanese prime minister came for a visit. He's had like all sorts of people come for visit. Everybody else getting a royal treatment except for Mexico and Canada. And even Mexico gets a better treatment than Canada. I mean, Trump has yeah, look at that. I mean, Trump has a huge, that bugs me. That one pisses me off because
I knew it would. That's why I queued it up. This is the instance where the United States, Trump is coming in and going, thanks for the opportunity, Canada. You totally ruined it for yourselves. And now we got a deal. Now we got a great deal. And they're going to make so much money selling liquid natural gas to Japan. That would have been our market. It was ours to take. And it's our own leadership that we have to blame for that. And we're somehow rallying behind our leadership in this. This is dumb.
Yeah, like bring Trudeau forward and like, Trudeau, play this back for me again. Just a mere 2 years ago, you told us there was no business case for this. Like, who lied? Did the Prime Minister of Japan and Germany lie? Or Trump lie? Or you lied? Trudeau lied to us. I told this story a million times. I was involved in one of these deals, in one of these LNG deals. And Trudeau was saying we were in a dying business. And I said, no, we're not in a dying business. We're in an industry that you're trying to kill. Unsuccessfully, because at the end of the day, reality kicks in. And at the end of the day, Japan went to war. Japan went to war against the entire world just about in the 1940s because they had no oil.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, and then Germany, they transitioned to green and it failed. Germany shut down their nuclear reactors. Can you imagine Trudeau goes there to Germany now and he's basically saying, well, you should have left them on. Oh my God. Like,
you know, and it's not you don't flip a switch and turn off a nuclear reactor, right? It takes years to wind the thing down. You gotta wind the thing down, make sure you spend all the fuel that you've got. There's a proper procedure.
Cool it off.
All of it. And then at the end of the day, you go, oh, we changed our mind. Let's bring it back on and turn it on. It's like, no. All those people that work there, they now have moved to other places in the world, and they work at nuclear facilities for those people, or they're working in other fields now. They don't do nuclear. It's crazy.
Nuclear is the solution to the future. I truly believe.
I totally
that,
agree
right?
with that. I agree with that. But Trudeau's not the guy to be telling us this.
No, he's not. And unfortunately, we're wasting time not researching nuclear. I mean, I get it, it's dangerous, right? The catastrophes with nuclear are big, but at some point we're still going to have to do it. We're going to have to.
That's old news though, Marty. I mean,
well, no, it's not old.
But that's like saying cars are dangerous because a guy a long time ago was driving a jalopy and crashed it.
You don't need to convince me. I'm just saying that's the excuse that people are accepting. I don't accept that excuse. I think it's a risk worth taking, and it's a very manageable risk. I mean, the nuclear disasters we've learned a lot from them, right? I mean, we learned. Well, Chernobyl was a screw up. I mean, that was guys like, hey, let's bypass every safety device on here and do a test. Fukushima, we learned a lot, right? I mean,
we learned a ton.
And where you build them is important, and how you build them and how high above the water they are is all important. So actually, Fukushima is still running, right? There's 2 reactors at Fukushima that are running and 2 that are not.
They're still going. I think it was more of a political battle when it came to that disaster than it was or a political disaster than it was a actual disaster. Yeah. And they're being extra cautious when it comes to the fallout of it. And there are plenty of areas where they're saying you can't go, and people have broken in, and it's totally safe to go.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between like even the type of reactors. So after the one in Russia, the Chernobyl reactor, that was a graphite reactor. They don't use graphite reactors anymore because they don't want something in a loss of coolant scenario to actually accelerate the the fission. You don't want that to happen. So they've gone to other catalysts, and now in a loss of coolant scenario like occurred in Fukushima, the reaction stops. You have heat soak, which is a thing that occurs, which can cause damage, but for the most part, you're not going to have a meltdown. That's the whole point. This is why they switched to these reactors. And yeah, you're right about putting it on a fault line. That's terrible, but it was contained largely there.
Even Chernobyl was an okay technology. I mean, it's not the best. There's more modern technology, but it wasn't the reactor at Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a screw up. I mean, Chernobyl, like I studied Chernobyl because you have to study it in school, and you have to study it as a case study in risk management and things like that. And they literally like bypassed every, like turn off all these pumps. They wanted to test something, and they literally turned off, hey, let's turn off all these engines on this plane, and let's shut off the hydraulics, and then see if we can recover. No, you're not.
We'll talk about reducing all of the safety at every turn. This is what we've been doing with our border, and Donald Trump has come forward in the first set of tariff.
Ooh, that's a weird twist. Okay, good segue there.
All right, thanks. So we turned off all of the safety precautions and all the safety measures at the border, and Donald Trump came forward and he said, with the first one, so this isn't like the steel tariffs. This is him saying, I'm going to put a penalty on Canadians in our economy trading with us if they don't just abide by what I'm saying you need to abide by. I'm cracking down on drugs. I'm cracking down on narcotics and all these other things and illegals crossing the border. And I want you to do so. Now, Justin Trudeau is tasked with the job of, which he agreed to do. He was going to do all these measures. And now he's come forward with what do we call him? We call him the Fentazar.
Caesar. Hey, a Caesar or no, a Fenzar or something like that. A Fenzar.
Something along those lines. And Justin Trudeau has come forward with this, and he's saying he's made his announcement. Just announced, he says on his Twitter, Canada's new Fenty czar, Kevin Bro. How do you even pronounce that, Marty? I'm not French.
Brasso.
So with over 20,
he's a Franco-Albertan. Actually, he's from my neck of the woods up north. But Kevin Brasso.
So he's got over 20 years experience. He'll accelerate our efforts to detect, disrupt, and dismantle that trade. Exactly. I replied saying 20 years of drug busts with no arrests. Sounds like your kind of guy. Ni hao to another CCP state, perhaps. I don't know. What are we looking at with this guy?
He's we're going to learn more about it, but I mean, if you find his Twitter page, he's got the No Child Left Behind orange and black logo on his Twitter page. So he's drank the DEI and the reconciliation and the net zero and all the Kool-Aids. And then so people have already looked into his background. He's a career politician, basically. He worked in the RCMP, but we'll see. We'll see what he accomplishes. I mean, I think his first job should be to fire the current president and vice president of the Canada Border Security Agency, because I read their mandate letter and they failed miserably. Before you don't. That's what we should have. That is one thing I miss that from the good old Russian days or whatever. Like, speaking of czars, right? So we should have gone to Trump and said, yes, we agree the border's a problem. Somebody screwed up. These two guys screwed up, and we should have offered a sacrifice of those two guys. Then we replace them with a border czar. But like, that's the part that I'm annoyed with, right? If we're acknowledging that there's a problem. Finally, Trump got us to acknowledge that there's a problem. Thank you, Mr. Trump. You're right. There is a problem. And step one is fire the people that got us this far. Like, nobody who's in charge of border security in this country right now should be keeping their job. I
agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that, especially when people are doing the digging and they're finding it. I mean, we have here Sam Cooper. He just had a recent publication exclusive.
He's had so many great interviews.
He's doing great work. So how the
Yeah,
RCMP, CBSA, and Trudeau government lost U.S. trust in the Fenty fight. Surveillance operations have raised alarms after placing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and a former cabinet minister in proximity to Asian organized crime suspects. I was hinting at this all along, that this is probably, like, why else would they ignore this issue if they weren't on the take? Really, why would this has become a huge problem in Canada? It says Canada is increasingly perceived as compromised, either capable or unwilling to confront entrenched transnational criminal networks. American and Canadian sources alike described a nation whose law enforcement agencies are in disarray, inhibited by suspect infiltration at the highest levels, obstructing investigations into billion-dollar bad stuff networks and money laundering operations. It's really nuts.
It's so nuts every day. It, like, you and I have to drink a lot of water and a lot of tea to not lose my shit every day, every time I find a story. You know,
absolutely.
You listen to Sam Cooper and he tells you one story. And then this morning I was listening to William Mackis, Dr. Mackis. He was being interviewed by somebody else, right? And so then that led me to make a tweet this morning. We still live in a country where it's easier to get, I'll say the word, it's easier to get fentanyl across the border and then into our pharmacies, and then I can go get it over the counter, than it is to get ivermectin. And so
that's insane.
And it is insane. And somebody was giving an example that right now, if I want ivermectin, which is a drug that's been, which is a medication that has been dispensed 4 billion times in the last 30 years. It's won the Nobel Prize. It's considered one of the top 20 medicines by the United Nations, and I can't get it in Alberta. And if I try to get it mail order from Mexico, the Canada Border Security Agency is spending more resources intercepting my little package from Mexico.
They'll find it
and confiscating my 8 tablets of ivermectin. Then
it's amazing how good they are at finding that. I mean, they say less than 1% of our containers are even being searched. But anytime you try to get it from Mexico, you can't get it. That's crazy.
People are telling stories about that. Yeah, they're trying to get it. You have to order it online 3 times and hope that one of the package makes it through the border security. Meanwhile, containers, sea cans full of stolen cars are going across the other way. And then remember that video last month we saw where that those guys in Africa were loading that car onto like the shitty pontoons, and then it had a Canadian license plate on it. Like,
Quebec license plate.
God, the world we live in, Clyde. The world we it's insane.
But it's crazy. So like even the United States, they're trying to work with Canadian law enforcement, and from their account, they're trying to work with American law enforcement, but apparently it's our laws that are actually in the way. And this is a great post from CCFR. They're always on top of things here. Watch, as a U.S. advisor, national security expert, has an interview with Rosie Barton. Now I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this one little clip, it really it rang home to this point.
Surveillance at the border. They are going to crack down on Mexican cartels. I talked to the RCMP commissioner about that, and there is more shared intelligence that's going to happen between Canada and the U.S. What else would be helpful in this instance then?
Okay, you've got very good police in your country.
Yeah.
Okay, you got great CSIS, your intelligence organization is first rate as well. Your problem is your laws. It's the Stinchcomb law, which I'm not, like the world's expert on, but basically every time we try to go up on a phone number in Canada, almost all the money laundering networks tied to China, which is about 90% of all money laundering in the United States, is tied to Canada. Okay, so when we try to go up on those numbers with your police, they have to inform the person that we're targeting their number. That's crazy. How can we run an undercover police operation with your country? Which is why we don't run them, which is why the seizure statistics are so low, because we don't even try to work with Canada because your laws are abbreviated and distorted. And I think this is an issue that goes back in Canadian history a long time. You need to update your legal structures.
This is insane. So you remember, you hear the statistics of, well, it's only 1%. It's only 1% of the bad stuff coming across the border. Well,
no, coming from Canada. So 99% comes from Mexico, 1% comes from Canada. But yeah, you're only catching 1% from Canada.
But this would be a lot of the reason why they're having a hard time catching it, because at least with Mexico, they're working with the Mexican authorities. Mexican authorities don't like the cartels, despite what you might think or what people might think. They actually would rather the cartels not be operating and the government actually have control of most of the country. But that's not the case. So yeah, the Mexican authorities are working with the U.S. authorities on these things, and Canadian authorities would like to, at least for the most part, as it sounds here, but they can't because our laws are so antiquated and it's ridiculous. And I honestly think that there's not much of a will to change that, because I mean, when you breed corruption, you breed the opportunity for corruption, you get a lot of corruption. And then when you have corruption, you have less will to get rid of that corruption. And I believe that that's every step of the way. When we look at our government, it's just so absolutely full of corruption.
Our government is too big. I've been talking about this for months now, even before Doge came a topic. Our government's too big, and it's just too big. It collects too much money from us, and then it just becomes, it's like people within government don't even know what's going on. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure if I asked somebody in an individual minister, like, what's going on in your departments, what's going on at external affairs, they wouldn't have a clue. Like, we're digging into it and finding stuff that they don't even know what's happening, because it's become so big, so corrupt. I mean, it's and it sounds, I believe it now. Like, I'm starting to believe some of the stories of corruption and incompetence and all of that. Like, there's no law. It's lawless.
I got to show you a bit of incompetence that I discovered this week. I don't know if anyone's talking about this, but this is so here's a tweet from Canada Border Services Agency. So CBSA, they put out this tweet. They said, it's a big caution sign. That it says entry into Canada anywhere but at an official port of entry is dangerous and illegal. You will be arrested. Learn more. That sounds pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Click the link and it takes you to refugee protection in Canada. Sorry, I have to. There we go. It takes you to the refugee protection in Canada laws. It doesn't tell you what's illegal or illegal to do when you're entering Canada. It gives people information on what rights they have as refugees. So if they're reading that and they cross the border, they're not learning about that they'll be arrested. They're learning about, if they get arrested, what to show as a URL to the arresting officer that they have rights. This is insane.
Almost like geez, we're almost giving them a flyer when they come across the border, a little pamphlet that says, this is your get out of jail card free, and show this to the arresting officer, and then you're okay. Hey, can I tell you another, on this topic? I just said we're kind of lawless. Somebody brought this up to me today, and I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Speaking of, just for Alberta, but I'm sure it goes on across the country, they told me that between every ministry that exists in Alberta, they all have law firms on retainer. Okay, it's part of business. So the government needs law firms on retainer. And they said every single law firm, respectable law firm in Alberta, is a client of the government of Alberta. And if anybody tries to sue the government of Alberta, in order to do so, you're going to have to try and find a lawyer that doesn't already work for the government of Alberta, so that they're not in conflict of interest. And it's impossible. And I was like, wow, I never thought of that. So yes, as government gets so big, they can interfere. That's an example of how the government interferes. Basically, what this guy was telling me is, Marty, if you want to sue the government, you won't find a lawyer who'll do it, because they'll all be in conflict of interest, or they don't even want to do it because the government is their bread and butter. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
insane.
because they're getting paid just to
that's
be on retainer.
Yeah, and that's what that guy that you saw in the interview, doing business with Canada is problem, doing lawfare with Canada, engaging our RCMP, engaging our courts. It's they've given up. So Trump is choosing a different strategy. He's like, I'm just going to go with a different brute force. I tried collaborating with you guys. It's not working. So I'm going to hit you with $150 billion worth of tariffs. And maybe you'll smarten up and clean up your system. But then the gullible Canadians are gullible, and we're not gonna. We're this will all go away. This narcotics czar. Ask him what he's done in 6 months from now. He'll have done nothing.
Yeah, he'll have done nothing. This is why I'm a little worried about what's going to happen at the end of the month, because I think those tariffs are just going to come right back. And there's a lot of issues, right? There's a lot of issues in Canada that I think that on the national security front for the United States, we've become a rogue state. We've become a rogue state and kind of a proxy for other nations, a proxy for China in particular. And this is where there's a lot of issues. I mean, China is pushing forward now, calling themselves a near Arctic state. When did that happen? But suddenly, and are they going into Siberia as a near Arctic state? I don't think so. They're going into Canadian territory. And what are we going to do about it? Marty, what are we going to do about it?
Well, we opened an Arctic embassy somewhere last month. I don't know what we're going to do about it.
That was the answer I was looking for.
I know what we're going to do about it. I know what we're going to do about it. Okay, so back to, I think Mark Carney's already stolen this election. He's being inserted. He's not gonna. He's been chosen. Listen to Mark Carney. He's not talking tariffs. He's not talking anything like that. He's not talking retaliatory. Mark Carney is literally saying, I'm going to print a shit ton of money. I don't care. I'm going to print a shit ton of money. That's all he's ever done. So Mark Carney is going to come in and he's going to print. If the Americans impose I don't know $125 billion worth of tariffs and it hurts Canadians, he's going to print $200 billion and give it to gullible Canadians. He's already said that. Like he's Look, did you see what happened at the Bank of Canada yesterday? I posted that on Twitter. They hired a second deputy governor. So they have, like I said, they're getting ready to just print money, man.
Do they physically actually have to turn the wheels of the printer?
Yeah. That's my joke. I'm joking about it, but they have Tiff Macklin, who's the governor of the Bank of Canada, and then they had a deputy governor. They just hired a second deputy governor. I'm like, they're getting ready to print, man. They told us last week. They told us or not last week. Yeah, they told us with the last interest rate adjustment, right? That they're easing. What do they call it? Quantitative
easing. That
quantitative
just means
easing.
Money printer go burr.
Yeah, listen to Carney, man. Just listen to Carney while he's touring. He's not even remotely preoccupied by this because he's like, whatever. Let the premiers do their thing. I don't care about this. He knows he's getting coronated in a couple of weeks.
This makes
me nervous. He has his plan.
Makes me nervous about people's savings. I know I'm going to be moving my savings out of the Canadian currency, and I'd recommend to other people, find a way out of keeping your savings in Canadian dollars. Here's one way to do that. This is a partner of the channel, New World Precious Metals. They've been working hard to help save Canadians with their hard-earned money. If Mark Carney's going to come in and money printer go burr, it's just going to reduce the value of the currency that's already out there, i.e. your savings, any money that you have stored away in savings. So recommend this. The QR code right there will give you a link to the website. You can get in touch with them, see where you're going to go with that. I know I got in touch with Bryce just the other day, and they're going to be putting on a seminar, a virtual seminar for members of the channel, for people who are just part of the channel, who are viewers of the channel. So I'll keep you guys posted on that, because sometimes people are just nervous. They don't want to make a call to these companies and say, like, what do I do? It feels like high pressure sales or whatever. These guys will just tell you what your options are. But this is a way. Like, I'm nervous about my savings. I'm getting into this, but not only this, you got to diversify. Put your money into other things. You might have to get a broker for that, or just get out of the Canadian currency. That's what I've been doing largely.
What I'm genuinely worried about now is that this is now looking like an exact repeat of 1978 to 1982. Like the Trudeau senior, the Pierre Trudeau national energy policy that sent the inflation sky high. Then the bank fought it and it came down, and then they patted themselves on the back and they eased their interest rates, and then it shot back up. And the real inflation of the 1980s that was devastating was the one from 84 to like 95. Like it lasted 11 years, the second wave. And when I look at what's happening right now, it's a perfect we're repeating history perfectly. If Carney gets elected and gets to stay in power, and they get to use, because they love what's happening right now is perfect, right? Like if you don't have a crisis,
it's an excuse.
It's an excuse. So, and they're like, oh my God, we didn't even have to fabricate an excuse. Trump gave us one. Like, Trump got elected. So they got their perfect excuse to try their universal basic income or some variation of that, get the printing machine going, and bread and circus for the populace. And if that happens, boy, everybody who thinks that 18% was bad when a house was only 3 times your salary, imagine what an 18% mortgage is today when your house is the equivalent of 5 times your salary or 6 times your salary.
Yeah, when you're basically underwater as it is at 4% or 3% where we're at. And actually, if you look at it right now, I know that they're coming down in the at the Bank of Canada, but the lenders aren't. At the banks, they're not dropping their interest because it's risk. You're still talking about risk. They can't do this. I mean, you look at some of these websites and what are some of the high, like if you're into financial, Better Dwelling is one of my favorites to tune into. This week's top stories: more Canadians are leaving for good, and Toronto housing inventory jumps to 70%. Like, this is not good. This is not good news. It's not good news for anybody. Inventory jumping to 70%, you might think, oh, that's great because then prices will come down. No, this is just giving an indicator that they're not selling even at the right prices, and people are losing on sales. That's not good.
Back to our gullible start of the show. These are the kinds of statistics I love to explain to people. Like, it's funny how somebody will take a statistic and get the wrong take on it until you really explain it to them, right? Like, like there was an example this week. Somebody tried to get me on an argument by saying that the Canadians worked harder than other nations because we worked more hours. I'm like, no, that's actually the fact that we work more hours is actually counterproductive. It means we don't work harder. We're working dumber. If you're working smart, you work less hours. And anyways, it's housing's an interesting.
It's about the
right
actual
now.
productivity, performed. You can't
just
judge that by hours.
Working more hours doesn't mean you're working harder. It just,
in fact, that's a problem that Japan has had for decades. Is their productivity is quite high, but it comes at the cost of more hours. So their productivity is almost on par with the United States, or has been for a long time, but in a 10-hour day as opposed to like a 7 or 8 hour day.
So you'd be talking about, say, their net productivity is lower, but they beat them in gross productivity by adding more hours. That's math. Well, it's like people who say that there's a wage gap because men make more money than women. It's like, well, yeah, but if they also generally work more hours than women, so is it really a wage gap? But
yeah, I would say that the Japanese are quite productive, but where their inefficiencies in productivity is in meetings. They do these meetings that are like compulsory and they take forever. And you just know nothing's getting done at those times.
Yeah, I don't know who, like, I'll go back to this one. I gotten shit for it last week, and you did too, in a sense. Americans are productive. I find Americans. I've worked in the U.S. I've worked for American companies, and we could do a side-by-side comparison of our Canadian branch versus our American branch of the company, and you could see that the Americans are just productive. For every comfort, they were productive.
No, we're good. And we're
talking.
I
went black for a second. I was like, "What the heck?"
Oh,
okay.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
I was gonna say we're speaking in generalities, and a lot of people take this personally. We're speaking in generalities. There's obviously outliers in every case. There's Canadians that work their tails off. That's real. That's a real thing. But the same Canadian working their tail off, if they were to move to America, they would be able to work their tail off and have more productivity per tail worked. It's just the way it is, and you would be able to keep more of it. So I'm trying to promote this, and I'm really trying to promote this in a way to say to Canadians, we need to fix it. We need to change this, because we can't keep this. We can't keep this going. And all the Canadians that are trying to say that no, Canada's fine, Canada's great, I want to remind people that we as a nation, and I'm not talking about the voters here, we as a nation are more left than California.
Yes.
And that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. I put this out on social media saying Canada is left of California. If you think it's bad in the furthest left state of the Union, it is by every metric worse than Canada. And immediately, you have people coming at you saying, well, Alberta's not like that. It's not left. And by every metric, if you look at the metrics, what make Canada more left than California, for example, can you buy yourself a handgun? You can in California. Could you get if you open up a business, are you freer to operate that business? Absolutely. Even more than the state of the province of Alberta. How much money do you get to keep when you work a daily job?
Yeah, sentences for crimes are stiffer in California than they are in most of Canada, and then California, they're considered loose compared to, say, Texas. Absolutely. So
now, is that the fault of the Albertans? No, I would say it's the fault of a lot of other reasons, federal government, all these other things. But by every metric, Canada is further left than the leftist place in the United States. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's not a specific topic, but it annoys me when people are unable to talk. Like, there are times where it's okay to talk in generalities.
Yes.
And it annoys me when I try to talk in generalities and everybody immediately jumps to specifics, right? Like, yes, are men stronger than women? Yes.
Yes.
And then I don't need a woman going, well, I'm stronger than my boyfriend. I'm like, yeah, honey, like yes, I'm talking in generalities, right? Like, are older Canadians more conservative? Are francophones more liberal? Are farmers more frugal? Are things like that? It's okay to talk in generalities because it has a value. There is sometimes it is necessary to talk in generalities. When I make a design when I'm designing a vehicle, I have to think in generalities. I'm like, what's the average height of a person who's going to drive my car, and what's their reflexes? And if you say, well, I'm taller than them, I'm like, I know, sure, but fuck, sorry, like, we can't design for everyone. So generalities are okay. And pollsters do that. That's one of the things the pollsters do. And I'm looking at those polls and thinking, yeah, I'm seeing patterns in the polls. I'm seeing patterns. Eastern Canadians are voting for liberals. It's bugging me.
It's bugging me. Marty, where can people find you?
Marty Up North on Twitter and Marty Up North on YouTube. Yeah.
See you again next week.
You bet.